All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Tim Magner. I'm the president of the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce, and we're delighted to be able to partner with the folks at NELA and NLEP, as well as LOGA, to be able to bring you this really critical webinar on COVID-19, the impact of on the oil and gas industry here in North Louisiana. Delighted to be joined today by Gifford Briggs, the president of LOGA, the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association, and his friends there waving to us, as well as Representative Danny McCormick, who is newly elected in House District 1 up in Oil City. And as we were discussing yesterday, the only oil producer who serves in the legislature. So we're delighted to have both those gentlemen join us today to talk about a critical issue for us here in North, but also Northwest Louisiana in particular. So with that, I will turn it over to Gifford and let you take it away. Welcome, Gifford.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for being such a good partner on getting out this important information. Before I get started, first of all, everybody's working from home, and quarantine hair don't care, and so we're having to wear a hat today because the hair is getting out of control. And also the other benefit of working from home, especially in times that are trying as this, is that you have little helpers all over the place. So they wanted to be able to introduce themselves and say hi. So come here. We'll start out with the youngest one first. They think this is so cool. This is Max. Max, say hi, everybody.
Hi.
All right. And then this one, I don't know if I can still pick her up. This is Chloe. That's our little gymnast. Say hi, Chloe.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Okay.
Soccer player.
All right, do your thing. I appreciate that. It's good to have a little bit of youth and innocence in the times that we're facing right now. So, look, yesterday was a perfect example of the challenges that industry is facing right now. We have a perfect storm that we're dealing with right now, and the challenges that the industry and the world of unprecedented times in dealing with COVID-19. But the challenges that industry is facing are a little bit more unique that extend beyond it. Going back to the beginning of March, we had our annual meeting, a joint annual meeting with Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, headed to the beginning of a legislative session with just enthusiasm and excitement at the conference. And it was the first time we'd all come together in years, and there was so much positive energy. And we walked out of the conference on Friday to news that OPEC had, OPEC Plus, which includes Russia, had sort of broken up their agreements and talks had fallen apart. And Russia and Saudi Arabia retreated to their corners, declaring that they were going to flood the world with oil and declared war on U.S. energy producers. At that time on Friday, oil wasn't high, but it was at $45, $50 in a range that was workable for industry. And then with the news breaking, and then by the time Monday rolls around, we had oil at $30 a barrel, and that just decimates the industry. And then following that, we see the demand side of the equation due to COVID-19 really start to have an impact as the economies of the world began to slowly shut down. We started seeing prices fall faster. And this time it wasn't because there was an oversupply in the market. It was because we were seeing historical demand destruction for oil, where the demand for oil was coming down by 10 million barrels per day. That's our puppy Kane in the background right now that I'm hoping one of my family members will let inside. So hold on one second. Challenges of working at home. And so what we saw is like this, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the year in January, where oil was at $63 a barrel. And, you follow that all the way to April 1st, which is after a full month of COVID-19, national economy shut down and everything else. And we saw the price fall from $63 to $20, which is a 66% decrease in the price of oil in the first quarter alone. There are very few, if any, industries out there that can see the value of their product over 3 months lose 66%. And And, I mean, you think about, anything, farmers or, restaurants, grocery stores, if all of a sudden, through no fault of their own, what they were selling their product for, they lose 66% of that price. I mean, it will decimate any industry and any company and any business that's out there. And that's what we saw happen to industry over this first quarter. And then yesterday, we saw something that I don't think anyone ever thought was possible, and that we saw oil have a 300% decrease in its value in one day, and the first time that oil traded at a negative. And we were working on a statement yesterday starting at 7 a.m. and by the time we finished it, we had to go back and make changes because it was falling so fast, so hard that we couldn't keep up. And first it was at $15, and this was the first time we've been at $10 since 1986, and then it was below 10.25, and then it was 1973, and then we went negative and hit zero. I mean, it was an unbelievable day to sit there and watch what was happening to industry. And oil started at 17 and finished at negative $37 per barrel. Now, it's important to just a little bit of context here. This is for contracts for May delivery. They had to close out yesterday. So these are traders. They have these contracts. They have to take delivery of the oil or sell it to someone that's going to take delivery of the oil. And what happened is there was no buyers. There was nowhere to put the oil. And because of that, they were just dumping these contracts as fast as they could, willing to take the loss because they had no option because there was no place to be able to put it. And so that was a one-day event, but, oil today is not back at 20. It's, it just crossed into the positives, which is a good thing. But June deliveries that we're looking at right now are at $14 or $15. And if we go as far out as March of 2021, which is the farthest that you can get those contracts out there right now, or at least for the information we could find, we're only looking at $32 a barrel, which is still well below what is needed for a successful industry in Louisiana. And in order to understand how we got here, we've got to really look at the global oil market, the balance between supply and demand. And so we look back all the way as far as really information that we could find, and we got a 26-year history here to take a look at. But it's important to note that all of these balances of whether it was a surplus or a deficit over the years have been at less than 2 million barrels per day, less than 2 million barrels per day. So we're talking about the Saudis in 2014 wanting to wage war on industry, and they put, we went from 1 million barrels per day of surplus in 14 to 2 million barrels per day in surplus, and that sent the markets crashing. What we're talking about right now is in the month of March, a 10 million barrel per day surplus. And in the months of April, we put this chart together at 25 million barrels per day, and it's really an underestimate at this point, very conservative one, where we're talking about 30 million barrels per day of surplus in the market in the month of March, and 30 million barrels per day, April, and 30 million barrels per day in the month of May. And this oil has to go somewhere. There has to be a place for it to go once it's produced. And when you're not consuming this much, you're not putting 100,000 barrels per day in the storage. You're putting 20 million barrels per day in the storage. So it's easy to understand why we're having these major storage issues across the globe. And so the futures, when we're looking at the markets, and we saw this come true yesterday, aren't always the full story. So when oil was trading at $20, we were hearing stories that physical delivery for crude, if you've got a tank and you need to sell it to someone, that it was as low as $9.40. In some places in the country, in Wyoming, it was $1.60. And so the actual price is even lower than what you're seeing right now in the marketplace and looking into June and future deliveries that companies are receiving much less than what the markets are actually showing. And when you're talking about negative oil, at that point in time, you're actually paying people to come take the oil off your hands because you've got more production or you've got agreements in place that have to be met. So the question is, what's next, and where do we go from here? And before the OPEC agreement, it was widely understood that if there wasn't some international agreement in place, that the free markets, that the laws of supply and demand were going to take effect. And as IHS Markit said, they will be brutal, unadulterated market forces that will shut down production, across the globe to bring the markets into balance. And what we witnessed yesterday was the beginning of that taking place. So we talk about the OPEC cuts, right? So it was 2 weeks ago where on Thursday they announced that OPEC was going to cut 10 million barrels per day, and then over the course of the weekend, it ended up being at 9.7 million barrels per day. And the expectation was that was the largest cut in the history, organized production cut from OPEC and OPEC plus nations, with the president agreeing that the United States would cut, though our cuts were not forced, they were market forced cuts. And the expectation with this announcement going into it was that it had to be a big announcement. And if it was a big enough announcement, they would be able to stabilize market prices and sort of bring the energy oil market into balance. And what you can see here is, while 10 million barrels per day is a good start, it doesn't really do nearly enough to bring the markets into balance. If we assume 25 million barrels per day in the month of May, then, and again, their cuts didn't go into place until the month of May. So April was full 30 million barrels per day of surplus. When their cuts go into place in May, if we're at 25 million barrels per day of demand destruction due to the shutdown of our economy, we still are putting 15 million barrels per day into the market. And when there's no place to store it, the tanks are full, the tankers are full, then the only option at that point in time is shutting in production. And talking to producers in the middle of May or middle of April, they were already being told in May that there wasn't going to be storage for some of their crude. It didn't matter how cheap you wanted to sell it. We didn't have the ability to physically take the crude and store it anywhere. And because of what we saw yesterday, with the price falling where it is, the shut-in of production is actually accelerating and happening much sooner than we originally anticipated. Global oil storage is expected to reach capacity by the middle of May, in which case every tanker, every place will be full. But again, storage is much more locally important than it is globally. We're not going to store oil that we produce in Louisiana, in the Middle East somewhere. So once our storage gets full here and our refiners get full here and there's no tankers to put it on, we just can't produce anymore. We have to shut in all of our production. And so obviously very important to the Shreveport area, the impact is not limited to oil, although that's where the most of the attention is. We've seen the same decrease in more or less in the value of natural gas as we have in oil, where in November of 2019, where gas had been stable in the high $2 range for quite some time, it fell down to the $1.60 range, and it's bumped up a little bit then since to $1.80, $1.90, but still nowhere near where we need it in order to be successful for all of our gas producers in the state. We sent a survey out to our members in the middle of March, the end of March, to get an idea of what these prices, what does it mean? What does the state of the industry mean for you and for your company? We asked, first of all, what the break-even price for oil and natural gas is, so we understood where do we have to get before companies are going to be not making money, but just able to survive long term. And the average of all of our respondents for oil was $37, and for gas is $2.01, which is good news for the natural gas industry because we're a lot closer to on the natural gas side than we are on the oil side. And what are the consequences? Well, the consequences are much like any business, in that we would see a reduction in workforce of 60 to 70% over the next 120 days, which we're down to 90 days now, and a 60 to 70% shut in of production, which we're beginning to see sooner than what we thought. Obviously, the reduction in workforce did not take into fact the PPP loans, but again, those PPP loans won't get us past the 90 and 120 day mark. So whether that extends the reductions in workforce beyond that, we don't know yet, but the early indication is that it's just going to not prolong it past the 120 days, but maybe some of those people that might have been laid off earlier are going to be able to try and weather the storm for a little bit longer. We also asked, what are the most important ways and what are the ideas you have to be able to help the industry out and we can do to help your company survive through these times? And without really it being close, the two most important things that we could do would be to identify a way to suspend severance taxes for the industry with price triggers, and do it in a manner that protects local government, because we know local governments, they're being hit by this as well. They depend on severance tax revenues. And so we need to make sure that we do it in a way that can help them. And lastly, to address these coastal lawsuits. And these are government-sponsored coastal lawsuits where the defendants are having 214 different defendants are spending thousands upon thousands of dollars every month paying lawyers. And those are dollars that are needed now more than ever to be able to make payroll and cover our expenses. And so we're working closely with our legislature to try and identify opportunities to be able to help in both of these ways. So what is the real impact of the numbers that we saw? We had 33,700 roughly wells that are producing in Louisiana. And if you look at 60 to 70%, we could see as many as almost 17,000 wells being shut in. And again, this survey was done when prices were still above $20. We're looking forward to an opportunity to be able to update the survey here and shortly, to take in sort of the new understanding of where we are. And from a labor standpoint, and what we're looking at our markets, if you look at Louisiana, next slide, please. We've got roughly 34,000 people that work in the oil and gas industry. This is direct employment. And if we look at that 70% number, that's 23,000 people and over $2 billion in wages that are at risk of being lost here in the short term. And you can see these are the three areas that when we saw the downturn in 2014, where oil went from $75 down to $45, that were hit the hardest. And we were, Lafayette, Home, and Shreveport were in the top, 10 in job losses over that period of time. And we haven't covered some of those jobs, but not all of them. And so looking at the Shreveport area, that's 5,500 people that are directly employed in the industry with the potential to lose about 4,000 of them and roughly 300 million in wages. And if prices continue the direction that they are, there's a high likelihood that number increases more than what we're showing here. So what do we do, right? So this is, the goal is we need to figure out ways that we can put the industry on life support. And so that when the price does recover, the goal is to keep wells flowing and people working for as long as possible. The higher likelihood that we can be a part of the recovery is dependent on being able to maintain our workforce, as many as possible, maintain our production, our equipment. And if we don't have to shut in production, it makes that a much more, a higher likelihood that we can be an active part of the state's recovery. So on the federal level, things that we've been focusing on One is increasing access to the strategic petroleum reserves. The federal government has the ability to put 1 billion barrels of oil into storage. We have roughly 77 million barrels of capacity that we're running out of places to store it. So this is a great opportunity to fill it up and fill it up cheaply and to hold it for a time when we need it later on. Initially there was funding in the CARES stimulus package to be able to buy the oil at $3 billion. It was defeated by Senator Schumer and saying it was a big oil bailout. Since then, the president has used different authorities to make some of it available for leasing. So industry being able to actually go and lease the storage capacity to have a place to put oil. The president's now announcing he's once again making another run at funding to be able to fill up the reserves. And they're looking at other opportunities to be more creative. He's talked about buying the oil in place. So anything that increases access to storage right now is a priority for industry. Looking at the Gulf of Mexico, which is very important to Louisiana's service economy, we need to figure out ways that we can reduce royalty rates. And they have put some procedures in place where companies can go and apply through a process to ask for royalty relief. The challenge is for the independents especially, but everyone in the Gulf is that this is done on a lease by lease basis. So these are thousands of forms that will have to be filled out that the department doesn't have the ability to. And so what we're asking for is broad scale royalty relief in the Gulf of Mexico that would apply to all of the producing properties. And we're continuing to have very positive conversations with our congressional delegation in that area. And lastly, expediting any regulatory relief. We've got companies that are looking at different ways to be able to do different storage options. And so whatever we can do to provide regulatory relief, to expedite permitting so that we can get additional storage up and running is something that would be beneficial to industry. So looking at the state level, and certainly we've got Representative McCormick on here, and we're getting into his territory a little bit. But first thing that, and again, this goes back to our survey, is suspending severance taxes and putting price triggers. So if oil reaches $25 or $30, I don't know what the number would be, $37. Obviously, the higher the better for industry. But if it's below that we're not going to collect severance tax, or we're going to collect a portion of severance tax. Say we're going to collect 20% and provide an 80% cut. That way, those dollars go directly into the companies. It brings the break-even cost of the wells down, makes it more likely that we can continue to keep these wells flowing, which means that we're going to be able to pay royalties and then be there for the recovery. And this would apply to both oil and gas because we're not where we need to be on the natural gas side as well. Then they address the coastal lawsuits. And again, these are lawsuits that are filed by governmental entities. It costs nothing for the state to be able to engage here. And there's legislation filed by Senator Bob Henskins that would remove the parish government from the lawsuits. But again, that legislation would not end the lawsuits. And we would like to see the administration, the Attorney General, go one step farther, given the unprecedented times that we are in, and interject themselves and engage in the lawsuits and supersede the parishes and bring an end to them and look at administrative remedies so that we don't have to continue to waste precious dollars on defense lawyers that we could be using to make payroll. And then regulatory relief. We sent a letter to the Office of Conservation with Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association asking for regulatory relief, for suspension of deadlines, in other regulatory hurdles and moving wells onto and financial security and other things. And we received a letter back from the Office of Conservation saying that, again, they will grant the regulatory relief that industry needs, but it will be done on a case-by-case basis. We continue to work with the commissioner as well to try and get a more aggressive stance and providing and announcing full-scale regulatory relief. But they haven't arrived at that point yet, but we're hoping that they're going to be able to get there sometime soon. And then lastly is looking at the local level, which, a little bit of a different scenario. And really at the local level, it's property tax relief. We've had a great relationship with the assessors over the past years working on finding a solution long-term towards property taxes, because they are, in many cases, the biggest expense that they have. In many cases, the way that it's done far exceed the value of the product that's being produced. And so, right now that legislation is on hold by Mike Huvall, Representative Huvall. We hope once the legislature gets back in, we can move that. In the meantime, though, before that constitutional amendment gets passed and gets voted on by the people and the rules get put in place, is that we're going to have to be working with our local assessors in communities across the state to make sure they understand how real these challenges are that the industry is facing, and see if we can work together to bring those taxes down in a manner that's consistent with what the markets are showing to industry. And so far, I think the conversations have been very open, very honest, and well received, as everyone understands, for the most part, the challenges that industry is facing in the state. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to Representative Danny McCormick, a longtime LOGA member and proud oil and gas producer, and someone I hope he would say the same. I consider to be a good friend and someone I'm looking forward to working with in Baton Rouge if we can ever get back. So with that, Danny, I'll turn it over to you, and then when Danny's done, we'll circle back with questions for everyone.
Hey guys, how are y'all doing today? Like Gifford said, I'm State Representative Danny McCormick. This is my first bout with running for political office. I went into office in January of this year. I'm a lifetime small business owner. My whole entire family is small business owners. We're all in the oil and gas business, so you can imagine this is affecting us deeply. So what's good to know is what benefits me benefits the industry. So I'm definitely looking out for my best interest and my district's best interest, which is heavily vested in oil and gas. Another thing I kind of bring to the table is I'm a grassroots organizer. Before I ran for political office, we spent a lot of time pushing back against overreach from government in our communities, and gained a lot of knowledge on how to organize in the community to go out and get the support of the grassroots people. And it's really not that hard to do. It's lots of time, lots of energy into it, but it's very rewarding. Something I'd like to make sure y'all know, I know Gifford does. Gifford and LOGA were very instrumental in me running for political office. A couple of years ago, if somebody told me I'd run for office, I'd throw a rock at them. But they were very instrumental. Gifford was one of the first ones that contacted me. I took the place of Jim Morris, which is also an oil and gas business. He was term limited, and after lots of prayer and lots of thought, decided to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring and run. LOGA has been so good in this. I don't know if y'all know this. Probably most of you do. They spent a lot of time out scouting for candidates to run for office this year, and have several in the House and the Senate, and me being one of those. I feel confident if Gifford hadn't reached out to me that that was just a key factor in me running for office, and I want y'all to know that. I'm one of several freshmen that are in office based on the term limit. So many people term limiting. I've built a good relationship with those freshmen. I believe I'll be a great asset to Louisiana Oil and Gas Association and their members in the industry out on the floor. I think I've gathered the respect of a lot of the freshmen. I think I'll be able to help get legislation off the floor that's beneficial to the oil and gas industry. And they'll be able to explain it to them in a way where they understand it. The freshmen are very pro-business. They're very pro-oil and gas. So they don't need lots of convincing, but I'm looking forward to working on doing that. What Gifford talked about the property taxes a while ago and about the constitutional amendment. I think that's something else I bring to the table through our grassroots organizing. I'll be willing. We've shot videos through our grassroots organizing, just getting the word out there to the public. Some of our videos got 500,000 views. It's we have learned how to contact the people and how to relate to them and show them how what we're doing benefits them, and break it down in some type of simple terms. And we're looking forward to helping promote those constitutional amendments that would be pro oil and gas. The main thing we need to do is get back to work. We need to get this country back to work, and we need to get the world back to work. And we have been doing that. We've been out in the front of the curve on that, trying to explain to people and promote it. And I think we've had great success at pulling legislatures that direction. We still got more to do. We feel confident. We believe in the American spirit. We believe in the American individuals. We believe they can beat this, but we've got to give them the reins. We've got to take the reins away from government, give it back to the people. We understand that the people, a dentist office knows how to open back up and protect the people that they serve. And we don't need a lot of government red tape and bureaucracy in any of our industries trying to dictate how we need to open back up. They're quite capable of doing it in a safe manner, just like I'm quite capable of. I've been in this industry my whole life, and I should be the ones that decide finally what I do to put in place to protect my men and women that work for me and work around me. The PP loans are something that went out, and they helped a lot of people that haven't. We've been working with our federal partners to see if we can arrange those loans where maybe they'll benefit more people. If you don't have any employees, or if you're out of business in the short term based on the government shutdown, keeping employees employed that you have nothing for them to do is not very wise move for the employees or for the business. Something that I've been promoting also is, we need to look at as we move forward, we need to look at it from everything we do, from an economic issue, from a medical issue, and from a pro-liberty issue. If we lose our freedom through this period of time, what's what made America great? We live in a constitutional republic where the rights belong to the individual. We've got to preserve that. We've got to have a strong middle class. I've heard some people talking about, infrastructure projects, which is good. I think that's great. But unless we have a strong middle class to get out and drive on those roads and create commerce, we haven't done a lot. So as an industry, we've got to, make sure businesses open back up, the middle class get back to work, and then ultimately the price will go back. As we've heard before, the best solution to low prices is low prices, and there's going to be a lot of destruction. I've seen these downturns. I was a young man in 1986, in January of 1986, when that destruction took place. What I've learned through there has enabled me to help a lot of other producers through the years. And what you got to do is you got to prepare for the worst the first day. You can't sit around thinking things are going to get better, but you got to prepare for the worst. You got to keep your powder dry, so when things do turn around, you're able to offer those jobs to your community and get them back to work. But that's about my spiel. If anybody has any questions, Gifford, I'd be glad to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you, Representative McCormick, and thank you, Gifford, for your remarks here today. It is challenging times for all of us, and nothing more so than what you pointed out earlier today. We've got some time for questions now. If folks who are on the webinar, if you can put them in the chat, we will go ahead and address them. If you're on the phone, if you want to send it email to kati@loga.la, we go ahead and get your questions included as well. I neglected to also thank the Red River Desk and Derrick Club for also being a sponsor and a participant in this webinar today. So a couple of questions that we've got. The first one is really, how can I best get involved in bringing relief to the industry? So those of us in the broader business community, or those of us as civilians or consumers, are there things that we can do to help the industry or help the community come back?
Yeah, and really, I think I'd like to let Representative McCormick answer this, but the most important thing, and look, Logan's going to be out there fighting, and I'm going to be picking up the phone and talking to legislators and talking to our congressional delegation. and talking to reporters and TV stations and doing all those things. But, what matters the most is hearing from people. Not that I'm not a person, but, it matters a lot more to legislators and elected officials when people in industry that are directly impacted, whether they're the owner of a company or whether, there's someone working in a pipe yard, hearing from them that they need help during these tough times really makes a difference. And so I know Danny does a lot of grassroots organizing and as a legislator understands it. So I'll turn over to him to see what his thoughts are.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gifford. That you said it exactly right. In my grassroots organizing, lots of the time I become the spokesperson for that group, like Gifford's a spokesperson for the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association, and that's important. But that's just part of the equation. We've got as an industry, we've got to organize our people and get a hold of these legislatures and know how you feel. These legislatures sometimes are isolated from a particular industry, but just because they're not associated with it. I'm not isolated in it because I live in the industry. And unless we hit them with phone calls and emails and stay on top of them and let them know what's important to you. I mean, all the time I'm in email chains with legislatures and they said, are y'all getting any complaints about this? That is really what they've got to have. I mean, I need to be out there, Gifford needs to be out there, but we need that support staff. They need to not look and see Gifford. They need to look and see Gifford with a herd of producers behind him that are promoting him. And the same thing with me. So yes, but that is definitely, you've got to reach out to your legislatures and senators in different offices and let them know how important this relief is to you.
And we're working on some a few things to try to make it easy to engage with people the right way. That we had some thoughts about doing it earlier, but also understand that in the beginning of this crisis, everybody was really laser focused on the healthcare side of it, and we didn't want to distract from that. Now that we have seen a shift coming where the focus is now getting the economy back to work and what does recovery look like and what is there, it's time for everyone to engage more. We do have part of the LOGA website called Go Elections, which was used for the elections for the legislature, but you can go there still today, pull up a parish, and you can find the legislators in that parish and all of their contact information, Facebook, phone, email, all of that is an easy tool to be able to find ways to be able to connect, particularly with our legislators.
Okay. So the question here, are you worried that the recovery efforts may disproportionately support south of I-10, and how do you plan to address and make sure Northwest and North Louisiana benefit from any recovery efforts?
Well, I mean, for looking at gas side, when we're looking at severance tax relief, that's broad scale, and particularly guys, and Danny in the Caddo Pine Island and people working in the Monroe gas field, the relief that we're looking at is broad scale. The coastal lawsuit part of it obviously is for companies that have operated in the coast, but those are companies that are all over Louisiana that are being named in these suits. So, we can't have a thriving Houma and a failing Shreveport. We need a thriving Shreveport and the Haynesville Shale area and Caddo Pine Island and Red River and DeSoto. We need all of those communities to be thriving along with Lafayette and along with Houma. So, it certainly is going to be, when I look at the industry, I look at everyone and there's different parts and different cultures, but it all makes up the oil and gas industry. And we need every part of it, every member of the community, every company, every employee, every family, all thriving together in this industry in order to make Louisiana what it can be.
Okay. Representative McCormick has a question for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I would like to add something to that if I could too, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I have something else I'd like to add to that as far as legislation goes is I don't know if y'all are aware of it, but I've been around longer than some people, but when the price of stripper oil gets below $20 a barrel, it becomes severance tax exempt. That's already a law on the books. It was put back in place back in the 90s. I'm looking, if we have a special session or the next regular session, I can bring this up. I can't bring it up in the session now. I've already tried. But I'm going to try to raise that number from $20 a barrel to $80 a barrel. I think, inflation has ate up a lot of that cost. Plus, the stripper wells will probably make less than 50% of what they used to make. So that would be a significant, if we could get that exemption down to zero up to $80 a barrel, that would be a significant benefit to everybody in Northwest Louisiana. And also, keeping the exemptions in the place for the different horizontal wells in Northwest Louisiana is extremely important, because that's a lot of people in my community work in the natural gas business. I think that's going to lead this recovery going forward. I think there's going to be just some destruction of natural gas along with oil production, just related to the oil production that's going to go away. So. But that's some legislation that you can look forward to, that I'm going to be running as soon as I can in the near future.
Okay, terrific. And so another question for you then, how productive do you think a special session will be?
I would think it'd be real productive, depending on who calls it. If the Senate and the House were to call the special session, they'll determine what is going to be discussed in that session. If the governor calls it, maybe not so much so. His interests may be different than the House and the Senate. But the House and Senate we've got a lot of physically conservative people in the House and Senate now. So I would think it'd be real productive in that case.
So another question, you mentioned the differentiation between the oil side and the gas side. Do you see the reduction in the demand for oil potentially spurring an increase in demand for gas, and could that potentially benefit areas like the Haynesville disproportionately?
I don't have any facts and figures to back that up. I know in the past it always has. Every other downturn was usually led out by the price of natural gas, which is good because it keeps our people employed and keeps them working. Even though the disruption of the oil price may last longer and may be slower to recover, it keeps the industry alive. And I wouldn't see any reason for that not to take place this time as it has in the past.
Yeah, one thing that I'm kind of watching right now is there's so much natural gas, that what referred to as associated gas, that comes out of the production of oil, particularly in the Permian Basin. And this is natural gas that was at one point was actually being sold at a negative because there was no pipeline or place to store it, and they can't flare it in Texas past a certain time. So as we see the Permian Basin and other oil production shut down that has associated gas with it, we potentially could lose 25% of our natural gas production because of the shutdown on the Permian, depending on how deep those cuts go. And so if that does happen, then you might see the price for natural gas go up. On the flip side, though, is gas prices, natural gas get too high, then we lose some of the demand that we see for it through LNG projects and through our petrochem facilities, who really have been taking advantage of the low cost of natural gas to be competitive on the global market. So it's going to be interesting to watch the balance and sort of where natural gas settles out. But then look, if we get it back to $2.75, $3, and it stays there, I think it's a good situation for our chemical industry. It'll be a good situation for the gas producers.
Do you think there's anything that do you see any actions by the Trump administration or the federal government with regard to tariffs or other things on restricting imports as a means of helping to support demand for U.S. energy?
Yeah, the tariff conversation is an interesting one that seems to popping up. And, the challenge with tariffs is the moment we place tariffs on oil coming into the country, we have to be prepared for tariffs to be placed on our products that we export. And we export a lot of oil now because of the type of crude that we're producing in the Permian. We don't have the ability to refine. So, tariffs, while they seem like an easy, good idea, the reality is that it may have a significant unintended consequence on the oil that we produced not being able to be sold, which effectively would make us more dependent on foreign oil and foreign crude than what we would hope to accomplish by the tariffs.
And do you think there's any potential for us, or is this an opportunity to increase refining capacity, or is that too much of a long-term play for something as incipient as this?
I mean, I think it'd be great for the refiners to be able to look at this as an opportunity to change, to invest in new refineries, or to make investments to change their refineries to be able to refine crude that's produced here. The challenge is that it is extremely expensive to do, and it is not a long-term solution. I mean, not a short-term solution. It's not going to help us today. So these are decisions and investments that have to be looked at and saying, is this going to be the right step for these companies and these refineries long-term? We've got a program in ITEP that would have been there to assist companies to make those decisions, but unfortunately, that program has been thrown in disarray through actions from the administration. So I think it's something the companies are going to look at, but it's not going to help us, certainly in the short term.
Another question: has there been any thought to reinstating the severance tax 5-year abatement for wells shut down in longer than or less than 12 months?
Yeah, so the inactive well program that was a very successful program has gone through certain iterations, and we haven't revisited that at this point, because we're focused on providing the relief that we need to in the short term by eliminating severance tax or more or less eliminating severance tax. But as we come out of this recovery and we're working for different solutions, everything's going to be on the table, and bringing the inactive well program back in the manner that it was, which this administration wanted that changed, and when we tried to bring it back to the way that it used to be, they oppose it. Maybe this will be a new environment that will work for. Certainly something we'll consider.
Okay. Representative McCormick, as you look at, this is your first term. You haven't had a lot of time to spend in Baton Rouge, at least in your official capacity yet. Just curious about ideas or expectations that you have for the session, and what you think the impact of these the oil and gas downturn may have on the state budget, and how that might play out in this session.
We don't have any projections what it's going to do to the budget, but we can sit down with pencil and paper and figure that it's going to be tremendous. I mean, I feel like we're going to be playing a lot of defense moving forward, trying to keep taxes and regulations off the industry. I think everybody's expecting the government bailout this first year, which was probably going to keep everything pretty calm. But as we know going forward, we're just going to have to make adjustments to the state budget. We're going to have to, whatever that looks like. I mean, I think we need to share the pain from the public sector too. I don't think they need to be, unaffected. The main thing going forward is we've got to understand that the private sector has got to survive. There is no public sector without a private sector. I think we've kind of got those wires crossed up over the last few years. We've got to do whatever we can do to keep the private sector up and going. And then we need to worry about, because that's the more important sector than the public sector. I know the public sector provides lots of services, but on the other hand, they need to live within their means. That's something we've had a hard time doing in the past. And I feel very good about the House and the Senate holding them. I feel good about our speaker. I feel good about the president of the Senate. I think we've got good conservative leaders there. I know Speaker Snyder is a small business owner himself, and when you call somebody up, or when I call Clay up and I talk to him, I know he understands what I'm talking about. When I call him, somebody up that may not be in that situation, they may not have the same life experiences, but I feel good about it. I feel good going forward. And I think it's going to be a good session if we can if we can get back in session.
Okay, very good. Gifford, any final thoughts?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited about our legislature as well, and certainly it's great having someone with the understanding of the oil and gas industry and the challenges that our small producers have in Louisiana, because that's a very important voice, and the larger companies that and their teams are extremely important to Louisiana as well. But the small companies are the backbone of our industry, and they've been here and they're going to be here for a long time. And having Representative McCormick there and having his voice heard is going to be incredibly valuable to Louisiana and to this industry. And I'm with him. I can't wait to get back to work. I'm excited about the task force that Speaker Schexnayder and President Cortez put together that is focused on the business community and getting the business community back to work. And we've got some of the industry representatives from North Louisiana, like Ray was saying, they're going to be part of it as well. So we've got broad representation across industry to be able to participate in it. So we know that we're going to get good policy and good recommendations being made back to the legislature. So when the legislature gets in, they know what to do to help the business community out and the oil and gas industry out. And then when they get done enacting, taking those steps, that Louisiana can get back to work. And I'm honored to be a part of it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today, and hope everyone stays well and we can get back to work. Okay.
Representative McCormick, any final thoughts?
I would. I'd like to just share with everybody that y'all have an ally in the legislature, and you have and LOGA and Gifford have been a great asset to me. Like I said, I feel confident I wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for them and their help and their encouragement to run for office. Even anybody that'd like to contact me for anything, you can go to McCormick, the number 4 LA.com. And that's my website, or if you want to find me on Facebook, it would be McCormick for LA. So feel free to give me a call if I can help you with anything. I'll be glad to talk to you. I'm there for the people of my district and the people outside of my district. I want to help the state move forward. So you're more than welcome to give me a call if we'd like to talk about anything.
Well, thanks very much. We appreciate that. We appreciate your service, and Gifford, we appreciate all that you're doing for our important industry here in our state. I want to thank especially the folks at NELEA, the NLEP, North Louisiana Economic Partnership, and the Red River Desk and Derrick Club for partnering with LOGA to be able to provide us with this webinar today. So thanks very much, everybody. This will be posted on the LOGA website and be available for review for folks who weren't able to participate. So thanks very much, everybody. Please stay safe and good luck getting through all this. We'll get through it together. Thanks very much.
Thank you.